It's been a little bit glitchy the past couple days, so we'll see how it goes now. Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build Your Playbooks. Most of the time in HubSpot, but playbooks in general is something we like to talk about and strategy behind it. Here with Madelyn Donovan. How you doing, Madelyn?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing fantastic. Really excited for today's topic. This is something that's been on my mind for a while. You know, back in the day when we sold, when I produced, customized products with all these, elements and technical specifications and like this material science space that I come from, there's always a process of determining what the customer actually needed. So there's lots of questions going back and forth that have lots of technical answers. And, depending on the size of the business, you're getting other teams involved and there's handoffs. And there was never like a system of record that held this information. And it wasn't until much later on, I'm like, there's got to be a way to solve for this, right? But usually you've got to itemize it, and you start trying to use line items for things like this. It doesn't really make sense on the deal. So it's just no system does it. So we just accept the fact that it lives outside and create our own spreadsheets and things like that. So that's kind of the context. And after working with you, earlier this year and watching you accomplish that for a very technical, product, I was like, I knew it. I knew it could be possible because you did it with Playbooks and were able to, bring teams together who usually aren't in HubSpot together, usually relying on other systems. And it was beautiful. And like, can you talk about kind of the challenges you saw or experienced, maybe the challenges your teams were talking about that led you to creating this playbook?
Yeah, I think, having disparate processes across every team, having duplicate processes, even processes that were contradicted one another, or questions and answers that contradicted one another, were all obviously problems at the high level that you want to optimize as a revenue operations professional, but those teams are also frustrated by those problems. And your data, of course, suffers as a result too. So if only there was a way to solve all of those problems at the same time.
If only. And this goes like hand in hand. We're probably going to talk about handoffs, like maybe every episode. But like the friction that gets created between sales and almost every other team, but definitely like technical teams, engineering teams, where just trust has been lost. Engineering doesn't trust anything that sales team says. Even if the customer, even if they see it in a customer email, they're like, let me talk to them. Like, right. And that's fair because they're the ones on the hook for whether the products are going to work, whether they're going to, satisfy requirements. And if some of these specs, if anything's out, like you're talking major, redo, time lost, revenue lost, costs go through the roof. So there's a reason that they are used to behaving that way. It's not because they're just, picky, right? So how did you kind of build trust into this process?
Just by asking questions, I think, rather than telling people how it should be. Because obviously, the way it should be or the way that it's being done, like those both aren't automatic solutions. So just kind of asking your teams, like, why isn't it working as of now? Why haven't you changed your process? What are the reasons that you don't think it's possible to do it another way? And are there things that I can do to eliminate those obstacles? And yeah, just being really curious instead of assuming, assume positive intent, basically.
Yes. And so often, like, they just don't know what's possible, right? It's not that they don't want to be better. It's just they've developed a process that works some of the time, at least. But they have systems like HubSpot, even ERPs, like lots of systems will handle this in a better way, but it's about like making the choice to kind of do it in a system of record so that we can reduce all the emails and calls and all these things that lead to, the misalignment. So we're going to walk through a live use case today as I've starting to get back into my material science, hat, helping the XRF company and the reference materials division specifically and kind of grow that business. It's where, most of my career was spent, and I'm excited to, get back in there, especially everything I've learned with HubSpot, and being able to enable that. So while I could, maybe click around and figure out, how to do this, I figured since you've actually done it before in this specific way, you could help me out today. Does that work?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So let's see. I'm going to just kind of put it in perspective. I think this will kind of start the conversation of technical complexity.
I'm scared.
That's fair. It's a fair emotion, I think. So this is an example of a certificate of analysis and built in Excel. And back in 2010 to 2013, I was in charge of a lab and I was the only one managing spreadsheets or managing the products and the production. And I had this spreadsheet kingdom that I've talked about before, where it was just thousands of spreadsheets. And based on the folder structure and who got what last, I could just go in, find the spreadsheet, clone it, like make some tweaks. And now I have a new, now I can support the next order, right? And the time that went into those, like say there's a few tabs and there's calculations and they feed these numbers and it just goes through the process, right? And it worked well for me because I was the only one that needed to manage all the files. I always knew where they were. The outputs were just PDFs that we sent to customers. But at that point, we're not asking anybody to access a database to like retrieve the information. It's all, you got to ask for everything. You got to call for any questions. And if I'm not there, good luck to anybody else trying to find information on the order. Luckily, I didn't miss too many days. But this is where, so these materials have, elemental values. And sometimes you have things like, in this case, this UNS number, you can look that up. It'll tell you exactly what's supposed to be in it. In other cases, the customer's saying, we're making this new material and I need to understand these 5 elements and their compositions, right? So, if I were to say, like, I want to support this better, bring this information, into the CRM in a way that, probably best case scenario, I'm able to create these certificates without, the spreadsheet management. But at the very least, I can document what the buyer wants, during the sales process, but also being able to hand it off to, the production team so that there's no reason to, it's harder to get misaligned. It's not confusing and there's no reason for them to feel like they need to reach out, to the customer, which is usually the case. And I think we might be able to use Playbooks what kind of questions would you be asking me?
Oh, geez. Well, when this is going to happen and by who, like exactly where in your sales process this takes place.
Okay. So we have a template that when somebody we don't know asks for a new material, right? We have a template that generally the first response back is asking these questions here to confirm, what they're needing. Like maybe they answer some of these in the initial request, maybe they don't, but this is all the information we need to really be able to quote it, be able to know if we can help them. So kind of at first touch with sales, let's say.
Okay. So someone reached out with an inquiry and we are responding to get some more information from them.
That's correct.
Like, I guess, first of all, we can decide, maybe we sometimes do want to send an email over, but maybe we want to open up the opportunity for sales to give them a call. So first of all, I guess, we could ask, which of these questions do we absolutely need to know? Like, what are our non-negotiables? Because if we can't get those, there's no deal anyways. So there's no point in getting the rest of the questions answered, even if we have the answers. Yeah. So are there any questions on this list that you think are mandatory?
So I think from a technical perspective, like these four are definitely important. And let's just say they're mandatory. This one is more of a, sales mandatory question, right? How soon do you need the reference materials?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great start. So we know that we need to know the technology type. We need to know what type of base material it is, if there's a specific alloy ID, and what the application is. Okay, cool. So right off the bat, we have a lot of different types of questions too. So like not only do we have mandatory questions, but we have a mix of like true or false, fill in the blank, this or that types of questions.
Yep.
So like, for example, if I was a salesperson and maybe I was just kind of feeling tired that day and I was like gonna read everything literally, or if you're my husband and you read everything literally or talk literally, is there a specific alloy ID that you are trying to match / reference? Yes. Done. My question has been answered.
That is a good point.
Yeah, specifying, like, please tell me what it is. What is the specific alloy? But little things like that. So we have
that's perfect, because that's where when you try to gather standardized information, even I'd say maybe it's not the salesperson being lazy, it's a international customer not understanding all the way, and the answer is correct if it's yes. So that's where this qualifying process, it's good to highlight things like that.
Yeah.
So I have these questions that I usually use to help. Why do you think putting these in a playbook will be Like, why can't I just keep doing this via email?
So we don't want to limit ourselves, I guess, is one answer. Because you don't want to have to rely on an email. You can use a playbook in lots of different scenarios. You can only use an email in an email. But you can also apply playbooks across the whole HubSpot platform, and it can impact multiple teams. You can share information across multiple teams. You can share that data across multiple teams. You can log it as a certain activity type. It's more flexible, I guess I would say, in terms of recording your data within the playbook, but then also the playbook's activity type in HubSpot.
Okay, I'm sold.
Cool.
Let's build one.
Cool. Sounds good. Okay. So we got our questions copied. Yeah, let's build a playbook. So we can open up the playbooks page.
That's in the library. And the way I've been describing library is like kind of like all the saved reference points that you might use throughout HubSpot. This has been one of the common places that people don't like what's happening here with the navigation, but
Yeah.
I don't mind it. It makes sense to me. So we'll go to playbooks.
Yeah. So we can create a new playbook. We also have the option to create a folder, obviously, but we'll hold our horses. And then, of course, we can always go with a template. I think that it's awesome to start from scratch, even if you're a beginner with playbooks, because I think it really makes you think about, what you really wanted to be doing in the first place, instead of kind of getting distracted by a lot of options or accidentally picking a different use case than really fits your actual use case. So I think we should start from scratch. And
Okay.
then can choose to add a title now, or we can wait.
Let's do that. I'm going to use the naming convention here. XRF reference materials. Let's say product configuration.
Nice.
And just for context, I'm using that to define there's a couple different kind of business unit like situations going on. XRF company is one of those in this portal. Then within each of those, they have different product types or product lines. Reference materials is one of those. And now we have what kind of the goal is of the playbook here.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
we'll click create.
Awesome. So now we have our blank slate. And this is when I usually just paste whatever material I have right in and start Frankensteining it together or apart, or reordering it, whatever we want to do. So
Awesome.
how do you envision the structure of this playbook?
I'm not sure I've thought about that beyond these questions. And I think as you say that out loud, like this is where we're trying to go from an asynchronous activity of emailing and they're answering via email. So let's just list the questions. It's very unlikely that we're going to be on a live call with somebody and just like rapid fire these 6 questions, right? Is that what you're getting at?
I don't know. I was just curious.
Okay.
But that's a great point. It's not always going to go in that order.
Right.
So, yeah, like they might start the call with something that they thought you wanted to know about. So they might jump like straight to number 5. And like we said, that wasn't one of our mandatory questions. So maybe we want to go back and be like, whoa, 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 let's like, you know, that's great that this is for calibration, but first I need to know XYZ so I have the context for like what type of calibration this is. So,
Yep. So, and let me see. I kind of like when I'm guiding people to do stuff, like how obvious is some of this stuff to get done. And there's always something to do on the hover in HubSpot. So if we include a question you'd like answer here, we have notes here. So we're going to start with this one. And I'm going to edit. And I'm going to replace that text. And I can click required here. And here I see I only have open text as an option. I cannot create a list to help my sales team understand what options are available, and I cannot update a property. So that's an important distinction. We have sales professional, and personally, that's one of the reasons I've gotten people to upgrade to sales enterprise in the past. That's how powerful this is. Just kind of side note. So it looks like all we can do is kind of create some notes.
yeah.
If you like, so I have professional, and maybe I'm not super excited about doing this now. Like, what would you tell me?
Yeah. So there are a few things we can do if this is our only option. So if we are for sure going to stick with sales professional and we are not going to have the option to, like add pre-selected answers or fill out a property, then basically what we want to do to at least somewhat remedy that is make we can do 2 things. Number 1 is we go like on the honor system essentially and really just rely on our team to fill out the question the right way. So we try to enable them to do that most effectively. So we make our question super, super clear and we ask them to pretty please fill it out the way that it needs to be filled out. So we can add some clarifying text, like just in the space right before that question. We can also add some language within that question itself while we're filling out that question field. And I think sometimes I've had issues like moving the questions around. I think what I usually end up doing, is like dragging and dropping.
Like I'm looking for some kind of special way to do it. It's like
Right.
just drag and
Yeah.
drops, dummy. Anyways,
Yeah.
so you said some help text here.
Yeah. So that's one way you could do it. You could add like, you could literally rewrite the question itself. You could say, what is the matrix? Yeah. Matrix. What is the matrix or base material?
And so do you usually, so what came to mind is just something off the top of my head, is if it is not one of these technologies, then we cannot help this customer.
Right.
Cannot help them, let's say.
Yeah. And like just going off of that, another way we can kind of lead the salesperson through this process is like maybe we do start with a yes or no question. And maybe that kind of helps them qualify this lead before they even get to the latter questions. So maybe we do first ask like, is it one of these materials? yes or no. Okay, if it's yes, then like what is it? But if it's no, don't even bother filling out the rest of this playbook because it's not going to work. They're not qualified. Um,
Okay. So if we say, let's say, are you looking for a metal alloy reference material? And save.
and then that
So,
way, that really like kind of does some of the thinking for the person filling out this playbook rather than like trying to read it and like maybe they're on the phone at the same time and like they're asking them, but then they're like, oh, great. Wait, actually, I just read this thing and it says I can't help you. So sorry, I just spent 40 minutes on the phone with you, but I, you know,
yeah, good to get to know you.
yeah.
Could you see like this is where like we could also direct like, oh, they need to talk to this person instead. Like
Yeah.
based on this answer, they need to go to this team, especially when you're
Yeah.
doing cross selling and upselling and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I even, so now that you can really easily embed a playbook within a playbook, or at least a link to a playbook within a playbook, I wonder if you can do that on Sales Professional. I'm not sure.
Oh, a playbook within a playbook?
Yeah, so like maybe like I don't know if there's a certain type of material that it is, maybe you want them to like maybe you don't want to put all of, there's I don't know, however many materials and then however many separate playbooks. You can I think it's actions. It's either actions or embed.
Actions. Oh, actions.
Okay, never mind. It's HubSpot content, I think.
That is new. Thank you for that designation.
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Playlists even. I don't know if I saw that before.
Sequences? How does that work? Anyways, could this, oh, so this could be like, oh, you actually want
Right.
like to go to the rental playbook.
Yep.
Okay. That is super cool. Kind of wrecked the playbook as I did
Yeah, I
that.
think it didn't save. I think it didn't save your progress, unfortunately, which
Okay.
is probably not intended.
That happens. Uh, Part of the challenge of knowing when things saving or not saving, and there's no save,
Yeah,
big orange save
I
button.
don't like that. I like hitting save.
Right.
I wonder if it has it in version history, even though on the right.
On the right, version history. Yeah, it should. Wow, look at that.
There you go. Cool.
See? No need to complain here. That's what happens when I'm on this plus and then I choose to insert something with that highlighted.
Oh.
I would imagine. Well, I'm not going to try again on this call.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is already like, it doesn't have to be like a full. I talk about change management a lot and how that most people miss stuff like this, like, or they don't move to the next step, or they don't get the next step done. They don't get adoption because of change management needs or not taking the time. There are usually things like this where, let's say I didn't present the template right off the bat. Asking questions about what kind of spreadsheets are you filling in, or like, do you have any templates that you use to help you understand and document what the customer's needing? Because ultimately they are communicating this with other, like they've been doing this for years. So they have found ways to communicate this information between teams, right? whether it's paper printout where everybody's written it in, which even there, I don't think we're far away from like uploading a PDF and then being able to, create playbooks off that. But like, there's always tools. Like, otherwise there would be no hope. Like, there's no way that they're just on a call remembering everything when you have these technical specifications. So finding those tools that are already in use and saying like, hey, we can start here just to start to represent, a better organized process. And, you were entering the data here, you're writing it down. Like, now we just need you to put it in this place instead. So same amount of time actually recording the information. We're just asking you to do it in a different place.
Yeah, definitely. And it only gets easier over time too. Like, there's always like, just because it's in a different place doesn't mean there's not going to be some upfront learning involved, or even remembering how to access this playbook, how to get there, reminding people to bookmark it and make sure they remember their password and all of that kind of stuff. But once that is out of the way, once people have been doing it for a week or two, it is second nature. And then you're right back to doing what comes naturally, but now in a newer, better way.
Yep. And so often, and the nice thing about this menu looking a lot like a document editor, right? Oftentimes, they might write it all down and then type it up into a Word doc that gets saved in a file folder somewhere or sent via email. And that's where it's like, hey, if you're going to type it into a Word doc, like, this thing happens to look just like a Word doc.
Yeah.
And I can make it so it automatically pops up for you, or you know exactly how to access it.
Right.
And that's where it's like, it's the same activity, just the barrier is it looks, a little bit different, right?
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying too that even if you don't start it here, even if you don't type it up in the playbook editor to begin with, it's also really simple to take an existing document, clear formatting, and reformat it in the way that, is most optimized for this purpose. So,
Yep.
I've definitely done that a lot.
Yeah. And as the whole thing screwed up on my insert, there's times like that. It's like, okay, maybe
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
don't
Maybe I
enter
don't
it
want to
into
do
the
it
system.
live. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But here we've got, the usual options. If you're used to anywhere else in HubSpot, you can link out to stuff, you can set up images, and this is the kind of stuff that just goes so far when onboarding new people, like being able to embed, images from like your quality program. Like, this is where there's documentation all over the place, documentation that usually doesn't get looked at when onboarding or training, right? Or maybe it got looked at one time and now it's in the back 40, like far away from where I actually have to do my job, right? Adding images, adding diagrams, like, there's a lot we can do here to help, the people, because ultimately the rest of the team is reliant on this person to capture information, right, in a way that, clearly captures what the customer is wanting and needing, or what the problem is, but also the rest of the team understands, that information. So yeah, we often create like these codes, like these product codes, and there's some codex somewhere, but we end up with like 3 different product names, the same product, and we're typing it in differently. And this kind of stuff is how you get to standardization, when it's the same options every time for everybody. Like, all of a sudden, a lot of confusion that gets created by processes like that goes away, just completely. And most people will appreciate that when it happens. So I'd like to do a part 2 next week, where we kind of take this to the next level getting into an enterprise, version, because this is where, like, I think the most powerful impact this has is there are entire teams that spend their time recapturing all of the information that was shared during the sales process to build out things like, purchase orders to vendors and templates like this, like all this engineering level documentation that we got to be so certain that it's right before we process the order. And we hear things like people are uncomfortable, re-asking again, or these things in the process. For some reason, it's challenging to do it again, or it's challenging to ask it in the same way it was before. You create opportunities for the customers to answer differently. And once we decide we need that information at the time of order or when delivering the product, how far ahead in the process can we answer that question in a very pushy kind of way? Like it's just a part of the process. We're asking this question. Now we have it. We don't need to ask you again, no matter how awkward it gets later, right? We already have it. Right. And no examples are coming to mind right now, but like you hear that. Like the only one that comes to mind is like testimonials if you ask for them after the sale. But there's other things like that where it's like, oh, if you add on, there's opportunities to just get a little more information. Absolutely. And if you can get it up front and it carries through, now everybody else's job, like it's significantly easier. And watch again, handoffs, like, and for the customer experience, right? Like, don't ask me all the questions that I've answered 3 times already, please. Right. Like, right. I know you have the system. I can see you sending me, marketing emails all the time. So you've got some kind of system to hold this data. I digress. This is a great start to help kind of me like visualize like where we need to go next. And I think that's another value in like kind of this, it's okay to step up. And I can be guilty just as anybody of like, oh, we got enterprise. Let's just go in and start creating properties and we're going to start saving all this information. Right. And then you get down the road and you're like, oh, I got to maintain that information now. And this guy's not putting it in the same way as this, woman is. Like, maybe I shouldn't have made that property. Right.
Yeah.
So I like advising in many cases, like doing a little bit more manual first, making sure you understand the intricacies of the process. Like you said, what's required, what's not, what kind of questions are we trying to ask here, and kind of fitting those, together. It's an important part of this. It's a strategic way to kind of improve the process. Are there any other takeaways that you'd want, people to remember from our chat today?
I think this really goes to show it's all about the logic of your process, regardless of what, tools you have or what level of HubSpot you have. It's about like setting intentions, I guess, and thinking ahead. It's just like any goal tracking or like planning, like where are we trying to end up and how do we get there? How do we need to phrase this question to make sure that people answer it the way that we want to answer it? And that's how you build properties. That's how you build workflows. So even if you don't have sales enterprise, I think that's a great start.
Agreed. So when you look at your processes, when you think about what information is needed, especially at points of handoffs, think about playbooks, think about where you can standardize, think about what you've been wishing you could standardize. You probably can now in a way that your teams will love. So look for those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.